Congratulations. You've made it this far. So, 2 posts today. Here's the first one. April 1st, the world goes back to work. Pretty simple. Remember, we were in the middle of the infamous 15 days to flatten the curve, and technically, based on that societal agreement, this statement was true. I had, by this point, gotten the stinking suspicion that we weren't going to go back on April 1st. It was already slipping. People were already talking about extra weeks. Here in New York, they had already talked about 8 weeks prior. But this was starting to be on a national level. And so I posted this. I used the Facebook design tools to make a cool little purple. Look at this thing. I got the 3D boxes happening. And the reactions to this were exactly what I expected, honestly, right? This is a little bit of a Rorschach test. And the comments I got were essentially no. I guess that's not going to happen. We had agreed to flatten the curve. Flatten the curve meant something very, very specific. Flatten the curve was to keep our hospitals from looking like Italy's. We knew this thing was coming through. We knew it was novel. It was going to be bad. It looked like it was killing a lot of people. And the strategy was very simple: to keep our hospitals from overflowing. There was a point in mid-February to mid-March where nationally we seemed to understand that we were going to get socked by this thing, that there was going to be a lot of death. And during that period, you had even the Cuomos of the world saying, look, this is going to be bad, but we can handle this. We got to stay together. We can do this. And I cheered that. I was rooting for Cuomo. At that point, I was rooting for anybody that had that POV and was trying to rally the troops. But I also think that there was a lot of America is going to screw the pooch here. There's a current in America of self-loathing that has been around ever since I've been alive, which I've never understood. I'm not somebody that dresses in American flag regalia. I am not under some delusion that America is a perfect country or any of that stuff. But there has been, again, since I've been alive, a very obvious self-loathing of this country and a rooting for this country to fail by certain people, certain groups. And there was a rooting for America to fail during this, and it was so supremely unhelpful, and it was obvious. And you add to that the desire for Trump to fail. And we had a really sort of negative approach to this. And as I was saying, from like mid-February to mid-ish March, there was, again, from the Cuomos, from a lot of people, like, hey, we can do this together, right? Who doesn't want that? We're America. We're a country. Even though you're on the blue team and you're on the pink team or whatever, right? Here comes a pandemic sweeping through. I'm sorry, but I'm on your team. Whether or not I like you or you like me, there's a crazy virus coming through. Let's put that stuff aside. Let's get together and let's handle this like adults, right? We can get back to fighting after we handle this thing. And then you started hearing these things like, Japan is going to do so much better. Germany is going to do so much better. They even said Sweden was going to do so much better because, this even predates the pandemic. But the idea that these populations and these societies are much more compliant. And when you start talking about, this country is going to do better than us because their citizens are better because they'll all comply, you may not think that force is involved in that, but force is involved in that, right? You look at Germany, what they went through. And even today, a year later, Germany is having to lock back down again because they've been locked down the whole time and it doesn't work. And you have to end up forcing your free citizenry to become not free in order to accomplish the stuff that you think is right. And just because you're too lazy or too ineffectual to actually convince people, I'm sorry, but you guys, Team Lockdown, All right, you have the entirety of the media behind you. You have the entirety of Hollywood behind you. You have the entirety of academia behind you. You have the entire administrative state behind you. You literally hold all of the levers of influence in our society. And if you can't use those to actually convince free-thinking adults to go along with your grand scheme, then that's on you. But I digress. We knew, even at this point, that this was going to decimate our economy. And it was very, very important to flatten the curve like we agreed, and then also to go back to work. You can still protect the vulnerable. And again, this is weird thing that if you didn't agree with total lockdown, that you wanted to kill grandparents, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And by the way, we flattened the curve. And why didn't we ever give ourselves credit for that? Do we really hate ourselves that much? At this point, it had become obvious that it was not going to be 2 weeks. And it was probably not even going to be 4 weeks. And those of us who were paying attention and sort of trying to ring the alarm bell about this, this is a train going off a cliff in slow motion, and everybody is on board going choo choo. And then there's a few of us, at the end of the tracks going, please, for the love of God, do not do this. You don't have to do this. You guys are making decisions on fear. You're making decisions based on worst case scenarios. You're making decisions based on lies. It was very obvious that our leaders were making up things, exaggerating things, all in order to scare the crap out of us, in order to get us to comply with these never before tried mitigation tactics. It's called the noble lie. And you look at the media, you look at the experts, you look at the political class, you look at Hollywood. You look at academia. Everybody was pushing all of these horrible, horrible things. They were puffing up everything bad. They were ignoring everything good. And it was all because they really believed that if they scared us enough, we would stay inside. And it was because they felt like staying inside was the only solution to this. They didn't care if staying inside had any negative repercussions for the economy, for our mental health, for our children. This is common sense. You look at this and it's actually fairly easy to come to these obvious conclusions. Sane, sober people who look at this came to the same conclusion, that lockdowns had so many negative externalities. And a lot of them that we predicted and knew, the economy, the kids, mental health, other health, etc. And then some we didn't know, and we started even warning about them now. But again, at this point in time, it was obvious that we were going to blow past this 15 days. And, this is a very, very hard thing for those of us, again, who are not on that train. Well, I guess we were on the train because we were forced to be, but it's going over a cliff in slow motion and nobody's listening. You're saying, hey, there's a cliff there. We're going over the cliff. Can we please not go over the cliff? And everybody's like, shut up about your cliff. We're dealing with this stuff over here. It's like, no, you're not dealing with that stuff over there. You're making it worse. The other thing that was revealed in this post we started hearing around this time was this idea of economy versus medicine, money versus health, profit versus death, right? And this, again, if you are forcing this decision, which is a very gray area, which is a very messy thing, it happens in real time. If you're forcing this into health or economy, you are unhelpful. It is not a zero-sum game. And ironically, the people that accused the likes of me of caring only about the economy were totally untrue. It was fairly obvious that most of these people were kind of only caring about the virus, the deaths from the virus only. And that is something that is going to go down in the history books as probably one of the most unhelpful things. The myopic approach to this. And so 15 days turned into 365 days, longer now. And wow, what a mistake. And that brings us to the second post for this day, March 23rd, 2020. Enter Michael Levitt. This was an article on Yahoo News that pointed out that a Nobel laureate, again, everybody was, in search of like the appropriate experts here. So we have a Nobel laureate. essentially trying to provide some hope. In this article, and I'll link it in the description, is essentially Michael Levitt making the case that the IFR is a lot less than we thought. It is, it seems like it's going to still be more contagious and more deadly than the flu, but that is not the Andromeda strain. That is not insta-death. That is not worth doing what we're doing. And that was his point. That was our point. That was Team Reality's point. My main point was to provide alternative information and to lift people out of the fear, because everywhere they go, all the default news sources were like, you're going to die. We're going to screw this up. This is horrible. And they were still clinging on to the 3 to 5% IFR that the WHO stupidly published and kind of didn't retract. And again, it all goes back to this noble lie that they really felt like if they scared the crap out of people, that they would obey better, right? They would behave better. We would all coalesce around this strategy of theirs. And so they kept lying and they kept puffing up and they kept, harping on the bad news. They kept ignoring the good news. And what they still fail to understand, and it's odd because there are studies about this. There are psychological studies about this, and it rings true all the time, which is if you lie to the populace, even if it's with the best of intentions, even if you're trying to be a strong leader and you're trying not to act like you don't know what you're doing, people see through that. People know that what you're doing, and they distrust you more every time. And unfortunately, a lot of our leaders and experts are not strong people. They are, I could say a lot of other things about them, but they didn't do this. They really felt like they locked into this Neil Ferguson strategy that had never been tried before and had actually been recommended against in all the literature. Never quarantine entire populations. Like, what are you doing? And in order to try and get everybody to comply, they lied to us. And it completely blew up in their face. And that's not to say that even if we had all completely, totally complied with lockdown, that it would have worked. It wouldn't have. And not only that, here in America, we immediately exempted essential workers. And by the way, there were no grocery store spikes. There were no Amazon spikes. And, here we are pointing that out, and nobody wanted to hear it. But here we had Michael Levitt, who has been unfairly maligned and censored and canceled and attacked by his peers. And I actually post some stuff by him a little bit later on, but he was trying to provide some hope. He was trying to say, look, hey guys, look, we have the same information here, right? But look at this. If you look at this in context, this means that we can all breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. It's not to say, again, it's not to say that we give up. It's not to say that we're, wash our hands and let it rip. Again, if you are making that argument, you are a jerk, because that is dishonest and unhelpful. It's very selfish. Who would make that argument? A lot of people, apparently. But here was Michael Levitt, desperately trying to provide us some hope. But this is perspective. And we, as a society, we're going, screw you, perspective. We don't want you. We want the fear. And by the way, thank you, Michael Levitt, who has been brave and consistent and largely correct. And I'm so sorry that you were attacked and canceled and bullied by your peers. I still can't believe it. These exalted scientists that you used to have dinner parties with that tried to cancel you. History will not be kind to them. History will be kind to you, though. So, thank you.